Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we'll continue with our introduction to TypeScript series. So in this video, we're going to be looking at functions in TypeScript. Okay, so how are functions working in TypeScript? So let's go back to where we left off from last time. So I'm going to go into my VS Code, or feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable using. Before beginning anything, one thing I would like to mention is I see these two files being created right here. I think these files were probably created whenever I was typing out they were this right. Uh, so let me just go ahead and get rid of those files. So I'm just delete these files, and also this one right here. I'm going to also delete that one as well. So I will have the dist and the source. So that's the only files I want in my folder right there. So once I have those right there, I can just go ahead and now clean this and delete everything in here. So now we're going to learn about functions. So how do functions work in TypeScript? So to understand this, let's go back to how functions work in JavaScript, because TypeScript understands and accepts every function, every syntax from JavaScript. So let's go ahead and say function. This is how you do functions in JavaScript. You're going to say output, and then they say you're going to say a message. You're going to expect a message, and then we're going to do console.log, and finally we're going to go ahead and log that message. Okay, so I'm going to say the message that whatever has been passed in. So that's basically the function I want to have right there. So go ahead and simply save of this. So let's see what the error is. It says parameter missing has an implicit type any, right? So that's going to give you a warning. So we have an implicit type any, but in JavaScript, this is how the function would look like. So for example, let's say it's going to be basically, if you call this function, that's going to, in TypeScript, this is not even allowed in the first place, because this could be this could be either a string, a number, an integer. So in TypeScript, the whole point of TypeScript is being type strict. So we can do this in TypeScript. So we're going to specify a type. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the type right here. So I'm going to say this is going to be of type string. So now that error is gone. So that's basically how to define a function in TypeScript. So if I go ahead and simply pass in this function, I'm going to call the function and then pass in the, let's say, hello world. Okay, so make sure that you're running in watch mode, because that's what I'm running in watch mode. So if I go back inside of in here, you can see I have hello world being printed right here, right? So you can see hello world right there. So if I scroll right here, you can see I have hello world. So let me just scroll up a bit, so you can see I have hello world right here. Good. And what if I call this function and then I say output and then pass in 4? I want to print 4. Now if I go in here, it also outputs 4, right? It also outputs 4. So even if I go ahead and get rid of this string, this is going to work, because at the end of the day, this is going to get compiled into this JavaScript, right? And this JavaScript is going to work because this is allowed in JavaScript, right? But in TypeScript, it gives you a warning, right? So TypeScript is more of a development tool rather than a programming language, right? So you can see in TypeScript, you're getting an error, but the code is getting converted into JavaScript successfully, and it is running in the browser. So it's just the TypeScript gives you a warning whenever you're doing in development, right? So this works in development, but in development, but in TypeScript gives you a warning. Okay, so that's good for programmers, because TypeScript is for programmers, right? So, but this has a disadvantage, right? So if I come in here and I'm going to say MSG message is going to be MSG dot to lowercase. Let me to lower, and then lower. This is, let me just say upper. Okay, say to upper, and then uppercase, just like that. So call this function right here. So this function is going to work on strings. So now I'm calling this function on a number. So what's going to work? Is that going to work? We get an error. So you can see one of the advantages of TypeScript, because in JavaScript this is just going to pass, and later on you get an error. But now if I'm using TypeScript, I can go ahead and specify this is going to be a string, and I'm going to get warning that this is not allowed. So it's going to give me an error. So if I check again, I'm going to get an error, right? So if I comment out this, and you can see that error is gone, and our code is going to be running successfully. So that's basically you can clearly see the advantage of TypeScript. In JavaScript, you can just write anything you want and get an error, but in TypeScript, it warns you of that prior before even the code is run. So good, that's one of the powers of TypeScript, right? So you can see that right off the bat. Okay, so we have now seen the power of TypeScript, and let's go ahead and demonstrate this more. So let's go ahead and clear this up, and I'm going to create another function, and this function is called raise2, and this raise2, I'm going to take in a base, right? And I'm going to take in a power, right? And I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm just going to return, I'm going to return the base, right? Raise to power, raise to a certain power. So this is going to be power. So that's basically it. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the types of this. So I'm going to specify this is going to be of type number. And one thing I didn't mention is that in other programming languages like C++, Python, we have these things of integer, floats, and all that. Okay, In TypeScript, you don't have that. All numbers are just numbers, regardless of whether they're integers, they're floats, they are just numbers. Okay, so that's one thing you have to keep in mind in TypeScript. So there's nothing like int or integer. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like float. Okay, so all these are just number types. So number, just like that. Okay, so that's basically, so this function takes in a base and a power and then raises the base to a given power. So if I go ahead and call this function right here, I'm going to simply call the function and print its output, because the output is going to return to us. I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to call that function going to be raise to, and I'm going to say 2 raised to 3. That's going to be 8, right? So if I go in here, I should see now 8 as the output. Great. So now our function worked perfectly. So now we can go in here and pass in a string, like it says a string of 2 to 2. That's going to give us a warning right off the bat that this is not going to work. And if you check in here, we get an NaN, not a number, right? So in TypeScript, it helps us to avoid all this. So you can see even JavaScript never caught the error, but in TypeScript, it caught the error. But basically, since our code is getting compiled down to JavaScript, that's why it's running in the browser and giving us an error in the browser. But with TypeScript, we can catch it before even running it in the browser. Okay, so that's the powerful advantage of TypeScript. Okay, so how do you set default values in TypeScript? So let's say I'm raising a given number, right? A base is in power. How can I have a default value, a default value of a default parameter? So I can pass in parameter 2. This is the default one. So if I go in here and even I don't pass in the power part, it's gonna default it to 2. So if I go in here, 2 raised to 2 is 4, right? So this is how you can pass in default values in TypeScript. Okay, so you just say the type and then equals to, and then specifying India. So good. So we can also specify the return types. Okay, so the return type of the data. So in Python, we also specify the return types using arrows like this one. But in types, you just say colon and then space and then the return type. You're going to return number, right? Because any number raised to another number is going to return to a number, right? It doesn't matter if it's an integer or float. In TypeScript, all other numbers, right? So if I check it again, it's going to return to me type number. So if I hover on this, you can even check the return type is number. So you can even just VS Code gives you an absolutely great documentation. If you can see, we're taking power being optional, so you can see question mark means it's optional, and then the return type is finally number. So that's the way you can specify return types using TypeScript. So for example, I can go ahead and do this. I can simply say, let me say const result is going to be equals to, and I can go ahead and specify raise to and passing to the 3. So 3 raised to 2, and I can go ahead and print out that result right here. So I can print out result right here. So if I check result is going to be of type number, because the return type of this function right here is of number. So implicitly this is going to be made of type number type, because this function is going to be returning number that we specified in here. Okay, so if you specify the return type as string, then that's going to give us an error, because this is not a string, right? So you can see TypeScript give us an error, so you can say bring it back to number. So this is how basically you can specify the return types. And you can also go ahead, even if you don't specify number, it will TypeScript automatically knows that since this is a number, then this must be of type number. Okay, type inferences, and this we discussed in the last video. Okay, so how do you specify multiple return types? Okay, how do you do that? How do you specify multiple return types? Is that possible in TypeScript? Yeah, so let's go take an example. Let's say that we have this function right here. Let's say the person passing power as 0. So you're going to have that as, we're going to say if, so any number raised to power 0 is 1 in mathematics, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? So so if I say equals to 0, so I'm going to check if power equals to 0. What I want to do, I want to return false. Let's say you're doing some complex mathematical stuff, and when we want to check some type, and the type is 0, the power is 0, we want to return false. Now this is going to be an error, because it says that type boolean is not assignable to type number, because we are saying we're going to return number, and now you're trying to return a float. So how do you specify multiple return types? Now this is easy to do. What you have to do is just say just have to say pipe symbol and then say a boolean, just like that, meaning that you're either returning either a number or a boolean, right? A number or a boolean. That's basically it. And now you can see, now this is already complaining right here. It says that because in case this one returns a boolean, right, and you pass in power of 0, then this is going to return to us false, right? And this is going to be of type number. Type number cannot store a value of boolean. So what you can simply do is just simply, you can get rid of the sign and just let it figure it out for itself. So you can let TypeScript do inference or type inferencing. So it will figure it out depending on the runtime. So if I go ahead and check the type right here, it answers false. But if I go ahead and remove, let's say, passing 3 raised to power 3, it's going to return to me 27. So it works perfectly. So that's basically how you can specify multiple return types right there. Okay. Okay, so the code is a bit off, but yeah, that's basically how you can specify multiple return types. So now you have looked at multiple return types. You can also go ahead and specify compulsory return types. So function in which we explicitly specify the return type, we must have a return type. So if you go ahead, let me just get rid of all this. So let's say I have a function, right? And we call it function. Function, call it random func, and this random func is going to take in base, okay, which can be of string, just something, just a random function, right? So this function right here, we didn't specify any return type, right? So what's the return type is going to be defaulting to any, right? So let me just go ahead and specify the return type as being string, right? You explicitly say the return type is going to be a string, right? But now you're not returning string, so that's going to be an error. So if you specify the return type is going to be, if you specify the explicitly the return type, then you have to have a return type. So you have to go in here and say return, and then I have to say, let me return base. Okay, let me just return base because base also a type string, so you can see not that error goes away. So if you specify a return type explicitly, then you must return a return. You must return a data that has return type of the one that you specified as a return type. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. So you can't have just a function with a return type with no function body like this. It's not going to work. Okay. Okay, so once we have looked at that, let's move on. What if I don't want to specify a return type? I just want to have an empty function. So that's why you can use other types. You have void, right? Now you can specify void. Now you can say have a complaint, say string is not assignable to type void. So I can just go ahead, get rid of this, and save the code. That's basically save the code. Now I can have basically it's returning nothing, right? So I can just have it there being nothing. Okay, so that's basically how we can have. You can also have it to be any, that also work. You can also have it to be undefined. That's another data type in TypeScript, so you can have it there. So you're probably familiar with undefined from JavaScript as well. So that's basically how you can specify compulsory. So if you specify a return type, then you must return something. The only return types that in which you're not required to specify to actually return a value is either using any, undefined, or void. You are not you can just keep up, you cannot return basically anything, but if you specify any, you have to return an actual a data type, that's a data with the data type of any. Okay, so that's basically it. So that's, we have looked at that, and that's out of the way now. Now let's move on to arrow function. So how do you work with arrow function in TypeScript? So we have an you can say const, so we have a function say hello, and this function say hello is going to be the of type. So we're going to taking a name. It's going to be of type string. String. And what this is going to do is it's going to be an arrow function. So we're going to say it's going to be the return type is going to be string. And what is going to go ahead and do this function is it's going to go ahead and return to us, let's say return, and return name, just like that. So that's basically it. So basically this is an arrow function. The name of the arrow function, the parameters this arrow function is going to take, and then finally we are going to return a data type with the same return type. So imagine I don't have this right here. I just have this, and you're going to return, let's say, hello. That's basically also going to work. So if I call this function, say hello, and call this function out. So if I call the function, if I go in here, it's just going to print out. It doesn't actually okay, we're not printing out anything, so you can actually just say we can console log the return. So you say console.log, and then you can log the return data right here. So does it close of this and go in, and now you can see we get back hello, right? So that's basically how an arrow function works. Now what if you're taking a parameter? You take a say name, and name is going to be of type string, and then you can say hello. Let me just use string literals here. So I'm going to use backtick, and then they get rid of this and say dollar sign, and then this dollar sign, and then this, sorry, this, and then another set of back. This one to say name right here. So that's basically it. So if I call this function, it's going to return to me the name, and I'm going to simply log out the name. So now you can see we're having an error because we have to pass in that name parameter. So I'm going to say let me say John Doe. So if I run the code, it's going to be hello John Doe, right? So you can see right here, hello John Doe. So you can see all that is working fine. So that's how you can work with arrow functions in TypeScript. So it's not complicated. It's just like JavaScript. You can also specify the return types right here, and all the rules I told you about return types all apply here as well. Okay, so now that we have out of the way, you can go ahead to your documentation and read more about arrow function and stuff like that. But something that I want to mention is that functions that do not have functions do not return anything, right? Functions that do not return anything. Sometimes we have functions that do not return any, so not even void, right? They don't return anything. In such cases, we can use the never to return to handle it, right? This can be used to throw exceptions and other stuff like that. So, for example, let me just pull up an example right here. So let me just get rid of all this, clear all this up. And I'm just going to have a function right here. So I'm going to say function, get that right. So function, and I'm going to say handle. Let's say we have a function that handle error. All right. So this is taking the error message, and it's going to be of type string. And what we're going to do, we're going to say the return type is, let me just say the return type is void. And let's see what I'm going to do right here. So if the return type is void, and I'm going to go ahead and say throw error, throw sorry new error. So let's create an instance, new error, just like that, and say message. So error message, just like that. So you can see I have this function does not return really anything. I'm not returning anything. So I can just get rid of voice, and instead of void I'm going to say never, never, just like that, and that will work fine. So that's one of the uses of never. So you can see you can now we can see a place where you can actually use never. So never is just going to you're not returning anything, you're just throwing out an error out in this function. So that's basically how we can use never as well. Okay, so guys, that's all of this. And one thing I also want to mention is that this can be used to throw exceptions, like there we see force terminations of programs. If you want to force termination of program, you can just create the functions. And if something happens, you want to close the program forcefully, you can use a never return type. Okay, because you're not returning anything. Never is also returned when there is nothing left in a union. So whenever we talk about union, right? You can either return, for example, you can say number or a boolean, right? We saw an example like this, right? So this called can be called as total union. We'll go into more into depth about this later on. So if nothing is matches, like the return type does not match number or does not match boolean, then never will be returned. Okay. Yeah, so that's it for working with this working with functions in TypeScript. That's all I wanted to discuss in this video. If you guys have any questions, any recommendations, let me know in the comment section below. I'll do my best to get back to you. One of the easiest way you can also support the channel is simply sharing this content with all your friends who are also doing TypeScript, liking the video, right? Give me a thumbs up on the video, good for the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't stayed subscribed already, kindly consider subscribe, because like 80% of you guys haven't yet subscribed. So kindly consider subscribe. That would be a great help for me and the channel. Also, you can drop me a comment in the comment section, either negative or positive comments. They all contribute to the growth of the channel. So drop me a comment and let me know what you guys think about the videos. And again, in the next video, we'll look at different type aliases in TypeScript. So if you guys enjoyed the video so far, like the video, okay? Another way you can help me, if you want to help me further on, you can buy me coffee. The link's gonna be in the description of the video. So thanks for watching, guys, and see you in the next one. Keep safe.